right postcode there.
You perhaps know Manchester a bit better than
I
I
do.
do. Yeah, I know that Rusholme is the one next to Gorton and Denton. As we said earlier, yes, Streeting's going to go. We're not quite so certain about Andy Burnham. It seems to be he may be struggling to find that parliamentary seat.
OK, John. Right, well, we wait, don't we? Number 10, that's going to be the focus again tomorrow. I would imagine we'll be down there bright and early, John, for any kind of early announcement. Any sort of timings?
No, depending on where Streeting does his launch.
Yeah.
I mean, we political journalists love leadership elections because we get wined and dined and...
Oh, right. I didn't get any of that. I'll be outside that door there, bright and early or mid-afternoon in the rain or whatever. OK, well, whatever happens, we will be ready. John, thank you very much. I'm going to finish the programme tonight with some pictures from Windsor Castle. A face familiar to you if you watch the programme regularly. Online safety campaigner Ellen Room, honoured today. Ellen, we've spoken to her many times here in the UK tonight, is a tireless campaigner for restrictions on social media for under-16s. This is in memory of her 14-year-old son, Jules, who died in 2022. Ellen believes Jules died after an online challenge went wrong. Well, today, Ellen received an MBE for services to children's online safety, and afterwards she revealed what Prince William said to her.
He asked me whether it was following the loss of my son and that the harms children are seeing online, and if he offered to help in any way he could. Obviously very relevant for him with his children, and children are seeing harmful things online which we need to change. And the government need to step up and do more once this consultation's finished, and I'll be on their case. I didn't do it for this. I did this to make a difference. I don't have any other children I can save, but I can make a difference to the rest of the children in the world. And so whether that's here in the UK or I quite often go abroad these days, we need to make a difference for everybody. This is a global problem and we need to step up and really make a difference.
Well, congratulations to Ellen from all of us here on the UK Tonight. That's all from us for this evening. We'll be back tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Who knows what could have happened by then. Up next, it's Yalda with The World. I'll see you tomorrow.
Tonight, Tehran, trade and Taiwan. What's at risk as the US president prepares to meet the Chinese leader in Beijing? And how will Donald Trump negotiate with his rival on this high-stakes trip that's playing out against the backdrop of war? Tehran and Taipei, one capital at war with Washington, the other facing invasion from Beijing. Over the next 24 hours, there'll be state banquets, temple tours and garden walks. But what really matters is the moment the leaders of the world's superpowers send the cameras away and close the doors. Also coming up, Keir Starmer battles to avert a leadership challenge as he's accused of being in power, but not in office, but not in power. So could changing prime ministers actually change the UK's place on the international stage? We'll focus on the foreign affairs credentials of the leading candidates. Plus, the murder case that spawned documentaries, podcasts and book deals. Find out why an American court overturned the conviction of this man. Coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. We're going to focus on Donald Trump's state visit to China in a moment, but first, the unfolding leadership crisis, which has dominated most of this week. Today, Keir Starmer was accused of being in office, but not in power. This is a prime minister under siege, a governing party turning on itself, a leader insisting he alone can steady the ship, even as voters drift away and allies begin sharpening the knives. For Keir Starmer, the comparisons with Joe Biden are becoming harder to ignore. Behind closed doors, Labour figures are openly questioning his leadership. Publicly, ministers are scrambling to project unity. Privately, nerves are fraying. Like Biden in the aftermath of that catastrophic debate against Donald Trump, Starmer has responded to mounting pressure, not with retreat, but defiance. Well, let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig. And John, you know, every day feels like a bit of a win for Keir Starmer, because every day the question remains, is he going to survive this day?
There are some senior politicians who believe he can survive this, but there are plenty more who think he can't and that he's on borrowed time. I think your comparison with Joe Biden is a little unfair. I mean, Joe Biden is, 80 plus and, so we say, slowing down a bit, whereas Sir Keir is only in his early 60s. He's in good health.
That's not the comparison. I guess the comparison is the fact that you've got both leaders facing mounting pressure from their party to step down and basically refusing to blink.
Yes, but prime ministers never give up voluntarily. We've seen it with Margaret Thatcher, although eventually she had to, and we've seen it with other party leaders as well. They obviously all prime ministers believe they can solve all the world's problems. I mean, look at Tony Blair. He thought he could solve every international crisis. And of course, one of Sir Keir Starmer's great strengths, even his detractors would say, is he's got a pretty solid record on the international stage. He's forged good relations with other European countries. He's taken a lead in Europe on Ukraine. And he is credited, even by his critics in his own party, of making the right decision by not backing President Trump to join in the war in the Middle East against Iran.
But I guess this is happening to him now. He is facing mounting pressure and frankly, we are seeing a loss of confidence. That is the reality he is facing, even if you're saying, well, there are those who credit him with, doing some things on the international stage that are working.
What has happened today is that we've had the state opening of Parliament by King Charles, which is the setting out. It's a lot of pomp and pageantry and ceremony where the King is on the throne in the House of Lords and he reads out the government programme for the next 12 to 18 months. But that has been completely overshadowed by the soap opera, if you like, of the battle for the soul of the Labour Party, the governing Labour Party, which, let's not forget, less than 2 years ago won a majority of 172 in the House of Commons. And yet it's had all sorts of problems ever since there. U-turns, sleaze, and dreadful mistakes in policy. That's why Sir Keir is under pressure. And last Thursday, the Labour Party did appallingly in local elections throughout the whole of England and elections for the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Assembly, the Senedd, as they call it now. And Labour MPs, in my view, have panicked, many of them. Many of those who were elected in 2024 now see their seat, they're being what we call a one-term wonder in Parliament. They look as though they're going to lose their seats next time. That's why there's a panic. Now, You mentioned at the beginning the credentials on foreign policy of the rivals. Well, quite honestly, they don't have any. Andy Burnham, who is talked of, he's the mayor of Greater Manchester in Northern England, and he was a cabinet minister under Gordon Brown going back a few years, and he stood for the Labour leadership twice. 2010, he came 4th out of 5. 2015, he was runner-up to the left-winger Jeremy Corbyn. Now, he's got no foreign policy experience whatsoever. Wes Streeting is the Secretary of State for Health. Now, his supporters would say he's a great thinker on all sorts of issues, but he's never had a foreign portfolio either. Normally, when a Prime Minister goes, the contenders for the top job are people who have had what we call in the UK one of the 3 great offices of state: Foreign Office, Chancellor of the Exchequer or Home Secretary. These candidates have had neither. Now, the only one who's had a pretty senior job is Ed Miliband. He is currently the controversial Secretary of State for Energy, who is vilified by his critics over his net zero policies. He was Labour leader from 2010 to 2015. We don't know yet if he's going to enter the race. The Prime Minister and his supporters are saying, with such a volatile international situation at the moment, this is not the time for this contest. Turmoil would result for 2, 3, 4 months possibly. And I think that's right. I mean, leadership elections, of course, there's a lot of rancour, acrimony, mudslinging, and all the things that we political correspondents love.
You love all the drama.
But of course, when you... What is President Zelensky of Ukraine to make of yet another change of Prime Minister here? What is President Trump, of course, was quizzed by our own Mark Stone yesterday, and the President actually launched into his usual attack about policy on North Sea oil and immigration, and then he said, well, it's a matter for Sir Keir. So whoever it is has got to really go on a fast learning curve on foreign affairs, because he or she will be thrust onto the world stage with so much happening internationally.
And just quickly, any speculation? I mean, do we...
You're going to ask me who's going to win?
Yeah.
It's because we don't know yet who all the candidates are. But Streeting looks as though he's going to go first, but he's regarded as too right-wing, too much of a Blairite, as they say. Friends with Peter Mandelson as well. That's not good.
Thanks so much, as always, John. And, of course, we'll be focusing more on how the political upheaval could affect Britain's place in the world later in the programme. Now, in a few hours' time, these 2 men, arguably the world's most powerful people, will meet in Beijing. And it's not an overstatement to describe that as one of Donald Trump's most important moments since he took office for the 2nd time. Well, as you'd expect, the red carpet was rolled out when the US president landed. He'll be treated to the pomp and ceremony that he so clearly enjoys. But there's a reason this coming meetup has been described as the clash of the titans.
China.
China.
China. China is on the march.
I know China very well.
I have a very good relationship with President Xi, as you know.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. China, first row.
He's a very tough negotiator. That's not good.
We're having a little squabble with China because we've been treated very unfairly. China needs us much more than we need them.
They're, of course, looking to resolve the trade war they fought last year, but the competition between the 2 countries goes much further than that. Who's the biggest superpower? Who can develop the biggest economy and the most powerful military? Who's winning the tech and AI battle? But this time round, Donald Trump needs China's help. He needs Beijing to convince their close allies, Iran, to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, which has been logjammed for several weeks. And what does China want? Well, top of their list is Taiwan. They've been agitating and staging military drills near the Taiwanese border. The US president's backing for an invasion will be a public relations gift.
Even if the US doesn't send troops to help us, it might still provide us with intelligence.
Do you think Donald Trump is good for Taiwan? Do you trust him?
I think Trump carries quite a big risk because some of the things he does really catch us off guard.
If China were to attack, do you think Trump would protect you?
No, unless we paid him.
And that's why people in Taipei are so nervous about what could happen next. So let's talk trade, tech, Tehran and Taiwan. Our Beijing correspondent Helen Ann Smith joins us live now from the Chinese capital. There's been a lot of anticipation. This trip was initially postponed. It's one that everyone is watching very closely in terms of what statements come out. And obviously the use of language will really be quite important when it comes to Taiwan.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. This summit is being billed as possibly the most important between a leader of the United States and China for a decade. And I actually don't think that's overblowing it. I think these two such unique characters at the top of their countries coming together at this time of huge global volatility, off the back of a period of unprecedented competition. Look, the stakes are really, really high, I think. Look, a lot of the headlines might end up being about trade, but I'm pleased you asked about Taiwan first, because under it all, that is the issue that the Chinese care most about. And they are going to use what they see as a pretty golden opportunity with Donald Trump as the president of the United States to push for that, to push for some concessions, to push for what they want. Look, I can't overemphasize enough just how vital Taiwan is to the Chinese, a self-governing island that they see as part of their territory, of course. They want it for economic reasons, for strategic and defense reasons. They want it for emotional reasons. They really see the taking back of Taiwan as the ultimate proof point of their ascendancy as a superpower. And look, I don't think we can necessarily expect some big joint statement on Taiwan this time. I think that's too soon. But look, this is an issue that will be hashed out, not necessarily at the top of the bilats, but over lunch, over dinner, in the corridors. The Chinese will bring it up this time. They will bring it up in subsequent meetings with the Americans coming through this year and into next. And remember, their strategy and their playbook is to just chip away, move the momentum ever so slightly, move the mindsets ever so slightly, undermine Taiwanese confidence, so that when and if the big moment were ever to come, the Taiwanese might think, oh, you know what, we're not sure the Americans have our back. Perhaps it's easier and safer to just capitulate. So look, be in no doubt, Taiwan might not be on the headlines, in the headlines coming out of this summit, but will absolutely be the top of the Chinese agenda.
Yeah, I mean, Helen Ann, for decades, the American policy has been strategic ambiguity, and the Chinese are now dealing with quite an unpredictable leader. So they will be looking very closely at, a slip-up from Donald Trump, where he uses a bit of language that they can then latch onto and say, we've seen a shift, as you say, to push the level of confidence that the Taiwanese may have. But just to shift your attention to, obviously, what's happening in the Middle East, because, this is an American leader also arriving in China, frankly, in a more weakened position at home, incredibly unpopular when you look at the polls. And Americans, frankly, fed up with, a leader who promised that he wouldn't get stuck in the Middle East. And that's precisely what's happened. And for the Chinese, they've been cautious about not getting too closely involved in this conflict, sitting back, watching this unfold. But the Americans will also be looking to the Chinese to help them in some way, resolve the Iran question.
Look, that's right. And look, I think it's worth saying as well that these two things are linked, right? Taiwan and what is going on in Iran. And the reasons they are is because coming into this summit, Donald Trump is coming in such a weakened position, really, a position that he would not have wanted to be in. He is coming here having to ask the Chinese for their help. They have, of course, influence over the Iranians. They buy most of their oil that they ship. They are allies in the region. I use the term allies a bit loosely because China has no great affinity with Iran, but they are sort of strategic, ruthless operators, and they need them for certain things, not least influence in the region and energy. But because of that weakened position that Trump comes here with, the Chinese know that they have a golden opportunity to push for the things that they want, most importantly, as we explained, Taiwan. But look, be in no doubt, I think this will absolutely be important on the agenda for Donald Trump. When he was leaving the United States, he really sort of flip-flopped on its importance. He walked down the line of reporters giving answers to different people, and at the start
start of the line, he said, oh, we'll talk a lot about Iran. And by the time he got to the end of the line, he's like, oh, no, we're not going to talk about Iran at all. So read into that what you will. But look, I think it absolutely will be important. And look, it's just wonderful for the Chinese, isn't it? The imagery of the President of the United States having to come here to their country to ask for their help. And look, be in no doubt, if they decided to help him out on Iran, and look, they're not going to hand it to him on a platter, absolutely not. They don't want him to come out of this situation looking somehow victorious, even though, of course, they would quite like the Strait of Hormuz to reopen. It would suit them too. But, you know, if they are seen to help, they can cast themselves as the power broker in the world. It would up their geopolitical prestige enormously, and it suits them down to the ground, to be frank.
And I guess the other thing you've talked about, the headlines coming out of this will be trade. Donald Trump is arriving with a bunch of tech bros, you know, the likes of Elon Musk, and he wants to look at ways in which these two major, the only two AI superpowers in the world, you know, how they can perhaps get something from each other around this.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, look, the staging of who got off the plane and in what order was pretty telling. You know, Trump comes first, he's followed by his son and his daughter-in-law, and then who's behind them? Elon Musk and Jensen Huang. And, of course, most people know who Elon Musk is, but Jensen Huang is a really, really important figure in this geopolitical relationship. He is the CEO of NVIDIA, the American firm that make those all-important cutting-edge AI chips. NVIDIA wants to sell more to China. China absolutely wants more of those chips, and that will be a big part of the negotiation, I think, over the coming days. And look, I think movement on trade and tariffs is likely to be the bigger sort of headlines coming out of this. Both, I think, want more stability in their trading relationship for sure. I think both have things they could quite easily give each other. You know, Trump wants the Chinese to buy some soybeans and some Boeing aircraft, and Xi Jinping would like some more access to US markets. Like, that's the easy stuff, Yalda, to be frank. And I think both of them will give each other something so that the summit can at least appear successful to a degree. But look, I just want to say as well, behind all that stuff, watch closely for the staging and the protocol here. It is so important. Every flower arrangement, every flag, every walk has been so meticulously planned. Remember, Xi Jinping has spent the last 15 years sort of presenting that he should be seen as an equal to the President of the United States. This is perhaps the best display of that he has ever had. The Chinese will use it. They are going to be strategic. They are going to take the long view. They are going to match strength with strength, and they are going to be tough negotiators. It will be a fascinating couple of days.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll be watching very closely. Thanks so much, Helen Ann, for all of your reporting. Now, let's just take a closer look at China's role in the Iran war. As a key economic backer of Iran, they've had to play a careful balancing act behind the scenes, as our security and defence analyst Michael Clark explains.
On day 75, the war is back in a holding pattern for the second time, and certainly it's likely to stay that way while President Trump conducts this summit with Xi Jinping in China. Of course, the Iran war hovers over this whole summit for the rest of us. And when he was asked about whether the Chinese should help on Iran, President Trump said, I don't think we need any help over Iran. Well, actually, you do, Mr. President. And your officials have been speaking quietly to Chinese officials for quite some time to get them to put more pressure on Tehran, for Tehran to agree more quickly the sort of deal that we think might emerge to end this war. And there's something more specific as well. This week, the State Department sanctioned 3 Chinese satellite companies. And they say that these satellite companies gave their images to Iranian targeteers so that the Iranians could target American bases in the Gulf. Now, the Chinese will say, well, these are just private companies. But we all know there's no such thing as a private company in China when it comes to what they do. If the Chinese didn't approve of what they did, then they would actually stop it very, very quickly. So the Americans have got something very specific to talk about. It's hard not to believe that Iran will not hang over the summit in a big way. And what worries the Taiwanese in particular, and many of the allies, is that in order to get a deal, particularly an economic deal or something on Iran, that the president may soften on his view of Taiwan, soften in terms of his opposition to the Chinese ever taking over Taiwan. When the president sees this sort of map, he always comments, apparently, on how small Taiwan is and how big China is. But it's actually a very sensitive issue, and it goes back an awful long way to 1949. And the Chinese have always said that they will take Taiwan, if necessary by force, but eventually they'll take it. And the Americans have always said that if you take it by force, we will react. They've never said what they will do. They keep that ambiguous deliberately. But they said we will react and we will not be indifferent. And the worry is that President Trump will back away from that a little bit. And this week, there seemed to be an element of that. The United States has agreed, Congress has agreed, a $14 billion aid package, mainly military and security aid, to Taiwan. That aid package just needs presidential authorization. When he was asked about this, President Trump said, well, I'll talk to Xi Jinping about it. No previous president would ever have said that. The idea that they have to consult with China before they sell arms independently to Taiwan. And that really worries the Taiwanese. Now, that sort of off-the-cuff comment, Trump may or may not have known what he was saying or have understood the importance of it. But for the Chinese, that's a pretty big diplomatic prize to have if they can hold him to it in future negotiations. So the Taiwanese are extremely nervous, as are most of the Western allies, that President Trump may be pushed into a position in this summit as a result of needing something on Iran that he gives too much on Taiwan. Meanwhile, in the Gulf itself, something interesting developed today. A very large crude carrier, which is a big oil tanker, left through the Strait of Hormuz, and it came towards Larak Island, and it went down to the Gulf of Oman, and there, round about there, it anchored as of about 1 o'clock today. Interesting issues about this. One is this very large crude carrier wasn't carrying Iranian oil, it was carrying Iraqi oil. But it went out via Larak Island, which shows that the Iranians had obviously let it go through. That's the channel that they approve of. That's where you pay your tolls if you're going to pay them. And then it went out, and then it anchored. It didn't carry on because it's carrying oil to China. Now, maybe it chose to anchor. Maybe the Americans told it to anchor. Maybe it's going to be an issue as to whether they let it through or not. 2 previous tankers carrying oil to China have already gone through. It would be surprising if this wasn't the third. And in a way, the story of this particular tanker, in a sense, it sort of encapsulates the nature of the global relationship at the moment between President Trump and President Xi Jinping over the next 2 days in Beijing.
Professor Michael Clark there. Now, Donald Trump is not travelling alone on this trip, and his entourage gives a good sense of his priorities. He's accompanied by White House officials, including Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, and Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. Multiple business leaders are also in attendance, including the Apple Chief Executive Tim Cook, Tesla's Chief Executive Elon Musk, and Jensen Huang, the Chief Executive of NVIDIA. Well, let's speak with Carl Chan, a fellow at the Brookings Institute in the John L. Thornton China Centre. Thank you so much, Carl, for joining us here on the programme. You know, when you put aside the niceties, the choreography that goes into a trip like this, certainly on the part of the Chinese, the fact is the relationship is marked by mistrust, and that's sort of the heart of this relationship as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the biggest sign of that is the way that the two countries try to use leverage with each other. That's really the operating term here. And you saw during the first Trump administration, Trump thought that he had the upper hand. He thought his ace in the hole was tariffs. And sure enough, that did bring the Chinese to the negotiating table. This time around, it's a different story. China has a card of its own to play, which is the rare earths card. Rare earths and the magnets used to power everything from consumer electronics, the automotive industry, to the defense industrial base. Those are things that the U.S. needs and that China almost exclusively has.
That's right. So China has, as you say, a monopoly over the rare earths, something they've been investing in for decades, long before anyone else was paying attention to that space. But what the Americans have are the chips. So they both want something from each other. Essentially, do you then see a truce that they're going to have to come to, despite the sort of lack of trust on both sides?
Possibly. On the chips, that's a complicated issue because not so long ago, Chinese AI developers were heavily dependent on NVIDIA chips. These were the most advanced AI chips that were used all over the world. And what's happening now is China's been moving to develop their own AI chips and their own AI chip industry. And the idea here is to reduce that kind of leverage that the United States has over China. And so, most recently, when Trump decided to relax some of the export controls on H200 chips, these are not the most advanced, these are not the Blackwells, but they are better than what China had before. When Trump decided to relax controls on H200s, China didn't gobble them up as expected. Chinese AI companies were certainly eager to get access to these more advanced chips for their own models. But the Chinese government was thinking, wait a minute, we need to prioritize our own domestic chip industry. And they were trying to find a balance between the two. So the story is mixed now.
Kyle, just help our audiences understand, we talk about rare earth minerals, we talk about China dominating that space. But just help our audiences understand, when we talk about rare earth minerals, I mean, they are essentially in everything, from our phones to, all sorts of technology and weapons.
Absolutely. It's hard to replace these essential ingredients that many of us have overlooked. They have obscure names like yttrium and dysprosium, but they matter tremendously, and they actually turn out to be a very powerful choke point in global supply chains. China's control over rare earths can essentially bring to a stop large parts of the consumer electronics and auto industry.
And Donald Trump knows this. He's sort of talked about getting the United States, on track to sort of meet China with that. He's talked about a timeline of sort of 2 to 5 years. Do you think that's even possible for the United States to have access to more rare earth minerals?
So the U.S. is certainly trying, and they're trying to accelerate progress in this area, and they're trying to work with other countries. Remember, the U.S. is not the only country that's facing this issue. Europe, other parts of Asia have been hit by some of these export controls that China has placed, and they're trying to figure out a way perhaps to coordinate, maybe work with Australia or Canada to try to source rare earths through other means. The question then becomes whether this is a race between China's effort to develop their own chip-making capabilities and reduce leverage there, and the U.S. effort to do the same for rare earths.
Kyle, I've got about 3 minutes to go, and I really want to talk to you about the war in the Middle East, Iran, and whether China will actually, try and work with the United States, work with Iran. We know that through Pakistan, for example, they've managed to bring Iran to the negotiating table behind the scenes. The Chinese have been working quietly. But essentially, do you think they want to sort of sit back and watch the Americans get themselves caught in this quicksand that is the Middle East?
Basically, yes. I mean, what they're watching right now is the U.S. embroil itself in another major conflict in the Middle East, one that is very tricky to get out of. The blockage of the Strait of Hormuz is something that the U.S., for all its military might, right now can't undo. And so I think the Chinese are reluctant to really make much of an effort. They might try to encourage the Iranians to negotiate. They might try to symbolically gesture towards, helping Trump, at least on the surface. But in reality, I'll be very skeptical. While they want the war to end, they're negatively impacted, and especially in the medium to long term. In the near term, they're actually doing okay. They spend a lot of effort and time and resources investing in renewable energy, reducing their dependence on oil and gas coming through the Middle East. And so while this won't last forever, in the near term, this is actually giving China a kind of resilience and an ability to step back and say, let's just see what happens.
Yeah, and they're displaying that to the world. And just briefly, I've got a sort of minute or so left, the question around Taiwan, because this is a really sensitive point for the Chinese. And they basically want the United States to stop their military defense aid packages to Taiwan. And they want them essentially to back off, and they want Taiwan to feel uneasy about that relationship.
That's right. They're hoping for some kind of change either in the arms sales or in the language that the US president uses around Taiwan. And, you know, they might not see this as a permanent solution, but they are hoping that some kind of change will reduce Taiwan's own faith that the US will come to their rescue and support them. And so the big wild card here is Trump himself, because his advisors, many around him, are probably very nervous about any change on the US position here and have come out in front of him to say so. But we don't know what Trump himself will say. He's been prone to making not altogether planned remarks at these types of events.
Kyle Chan, really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And I discussed the visit with Richard Engel on today's issue of the World podcast. Just have a listen. The idea that the Chinese would suddenly come to Donald Trump or the United States' rescue on the point of Iran, I think is, almost short-sighted, and certainly not what regional leaders think that the Chinese will do.
I think they're going to try and take advantage of President Trump's loose, free-flowing style and see if they can get him to move the dial away from Taiwan.
Very much what Kyle Chan was just telling us now. You can listen by scanning the QR on the screen right now or wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll have full coverage of Donald Trump's state visit to China live from 2 a.m. right here on Sky News. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up, Keir Starmer's leadership crisis. Does a change undermine the UK's standing on the global stage? Join us for that. I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Well, as we've been covering extensively here on Sky News, Sir Keir Starmer's future as Prime Minister is in limbo since taking office. Sir Keir's attempt to position the UK as a stable world leader, filling a void created by the US, whether it's been Ukraine, European security or NATO cooperation. His work to put the UK out front on these issues also risks being undermined by any leadership change. So what's next for the Prime Minister? Our political editor Beth Rigby reports.
Are you going to resign, Health Secretary?
Yeah, Wes Streeting, the man who wants to be PM, into number 10 for a showdown with the man currently in the job. In Downing Street for just 16 minutes to meet with Keir Starmer.
What did you say, Mr. Streeting?
The meeting short, Streeting's exit swift.
Is the cabinet behind you, Prime Minister?
Soon after, the PM out of the door, clutching the hand of his wife Victoria on their way to the state opening of Parliament and into the political storm. Above the fray, the King and Queen, from Buckingham Palace to the Palace of Westminster, the monarch arriving to lay out Labour's programme for government. But this day of pageantry punctuated by politics, Black Rod's traditional banging on the door of the Commons to summon MPs for the King's speech was met with a joke at the expense of Manchester's mayor.
Not now, Andy.
Burnham desperate to get back to the Commons in time for any leadership race.
Black Rod!
Gallows humour from Labour MPs. Their leader put in on a brave face, making pleasantries with his opposite number, Kemi Badenoch, on the procession to the House of Lords. His rival, Wes Streeting, was less talkative, but he's the man everyone was talking about. With allies of the Health Secretary telling me he is preparing to resign from government to try to trigger a leadership race. His cabinet colleague unimpressed. Do you feel angry with him?
I don't think, in my view, this is the moment for a leadership challenge. I think we should back the Prime Minister, and I will remain of that view. And I would say to my colleagues, think about what really matters for the future of the country. And we're less than 2 years in. Less than 2 years in. We've made a start. We've got a lot more to do. Let's get on with the task.
The King's speech delivered, MPs back to the Commons to debate its content. But Badenoch play into the difficult politics of the front bench too.
But then I suppose the Health Secretary has been a bit distracted lately, hasn't he? Yeah, hasn't he? Yeah. He's chuntering now. Why don't you just do your job? Do your job. Even worse, Mr. Speaker, is what isn't in the gracious speech. There's no point in him giving me dirty looks. We all know what he's been up to.
The Prime Minister trying very hard to get on with the day job.
Mr. Speaker, can I say what a pleasure it is to welcome the gracious speech of His Majesty and the radical agenda of this Labour government that will tear down the status quo that has failed working people and build a stronger, fairer Britain.
But even he had to acknowledge his predicament, making a joke at his own expense as he spoke warmly of backbencher Naz Shah.
Her list of endorsements is truly impressive, reaching well over 100 members. At last, Mr. Speaker, a list that we could all get behind.
The PM there referencing his own list of endorsements, gathering more than 100 names of MPs backing him as the leader. He has a big chunk of cabinet supporters too. But the party's descending into civil war. And on the other side of the ledger, there are over 85 MPs calling for him to go. 4 ministers have quit. and Wes Streeting could be the first cabinet resignation. Number 10 sources tell me they don't think Streeting has the magic number of 81 names to trigger a leadership race. His allies tell me they do. It's very unclear what might unfold. What's more certain is that the chaos continues. It's been a long week for this man, and it shows. Keir Starmer meeting ministers in his parliamentary study tonight, warning of the chaos to come if Streeting succeeds in mounting a leadership challenge. But Starmer can't control what happens next. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, let's bring in Lord Peter Ricketts, a former National Security Advisor and Undersecretary at the Foreign Office. Thank you so much, Lord Ricketts, for joining us here on the programme. What we've seen, and we heard there from Beth Rigby, is last few days, chaos, drama, a Prime Minister that won't blink and frankly, remains defiant.
Yes, but this is sucking all the oxygen out of the wider political problems that Britain ought to be in the thick of trying to solve. Ukraine, Iran, the future of NATO. None of this is getting any attention because it's all the psychodrama in Westminster. And a lot of the international crisis diplomacy these days happens at leader level. You've got to be there with Emmanuel Macron, France, with Chancellor Merz, with President Zelensky. And Keir Starmer has spent a lot of time building relationships of trust with these people. And if he's not there, or if he's seen to be weakened at home because of the turmoil in his own party, uncertain how long he'll be Prime Minister, that has to weaken Britain's voice at a crucial time in world affairs.
Yes, and I want to talk about, how this is perceived internationally and on the global stage. But do you believe that the Prime Minister can survive this when there are, 88 Labour MPs who have now called for him to leave his post? Even internationally, when you look at a leader that's been weakened in this way, it's not a good look.
It's not a good look. I don't know whether he can survive this crisis, but it feels like if he gets through this one, he will be in a state of permanent semi-crisis with his own party, which does sap confidence in him abroad. I don't think it affects his capacity to deal with the day-to-day issues, the work on coalition of willing on Ukraine or working with other Europeans to put up some kind of mechanism in the Gulf. What it really does impact on is anything with longer term implications. So we're due to have a summit with the EU, Commission President van der Leyen next month. She is not going to want to open a big, bold, new negotiation getting closer to the EU, which is what the government want, if she can't be sure that the Prime Minister is going to be there in the next 6 or 9 months, and also looking over his shoulder at Nigel Farage and the challenge that he might present. So anything like that, thinking about the future of NATO, when the Prime Minister won't have the political backing to get more money for defence, these things, the longer-term strategic issues, a Prime Minister is seriously weakened if he can't command a stable majority at home and be seen to do that.
Earlier in the programme, I made comparisons to Joe Biden, and my colleague, John Craig, was reluctant to do that because he said, it's unfair. You're talking about an 81-year-old, man who his cognitive abilities were fraying, and that's not where Sir Keir is. But that's not where I was making the comparison. The comparison is the fact that there's growing calls from within your party saying you need to go. And, he's clinging on to power. And for Joe Biden, it was after that disastrous debate where he did morning television in the United States and said, if they want me to go, challenge me, remove me, come and take me on if you want to do that. But, America has spoken and I'm the president of the country. Do you think that, that the Prime Minister is taking a similar approach?
Well, I don't think the two cases are parallel, Yalda. I can see absolutely what you're driving at. That was a case where there was real cognitive decline and he was hanging on too long before accepting somebody else would compete for the next presidential election. Keir Starmer, nobody thinks he's in that position. I think your general point is right, that if you are weak at home, if you're contested, if you're constantly looking over your shoulder, even if you survive one challenge, there may be another one, all of that weakens you internationally. Other leaders, of course, see where a leader is at home. They're reading the papers too. If you look at France, I mean, President Macron is sure of completing his term till this time next year, but the constant shift of governments weakens him because he can't get the money, because people can't be sure of whether what he says will hold for more than 12 months. So yes, weakness and chaos and instability in politics at home weakens a leader internationally. And that's a real risk for Britain, I think, given that we have had a leading influential voice in the big issues of the day. Keir Starmer's done well on that. I think people would also worry that if he was replaced by somebody else who's not well known internationally, has no international experience, all three of the candidates that we're talking about fall into that category, they will be consumed by domestic politics. And once again, they'll start from scratch building the relationships internationally. We also have a new foreign secretary. We don't have a permanent secretary in the Foreign Office because Ollie Robbins was sacked. So Britain's foreign policy instrument mechanism will be weakened quite significantly. And this is a factor people have to bear in mind.
And that all-important relationship with Donald Trump, which, whether you rightly or wrongly, whatever you think of the way in which the Prime Minister's handled it, he has managed to stand his ground on certain issues with Donald Trump.
Yes, I mean, he sort of learned how to handle Donald Trump and to accept that insults will come flying his way from time to time, but just get on doggedly with the job. And I think they have maintained some kind of relationship. Obviously, the King's visit helped with that as well. I mean, a newcomer, again, starts from complete scratch. And I don't think Donald Trump is going to have any great kind of confidence or willingness to deal with a completely new figure who he hasn't heard of before. So the fact that Keir Starmer has put in the hard yards with Donald Trump, has kept the relationship going. Also, his excellent national security advisor, Jonathan Powell, clearly has good links in Washington. If Keir Starmer and Jonathan Powell were both to go, since they came in as a package, that would be a real blow to Britain's capacity to influence what's going on in Washington. I mean, I know this isn't front and center of the political debate that you're reporting all the time at the moment, but it is a real factor in a world of disorder and instability, where British authority and British voice does count.
Lord Peter Ricketts, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, a twist in the Murdoch murders. A US court overturns the double murder conviction of former lawyer Alec Murdoch. The details next.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Let's go to the US now, and a murder trial that's captured the attention of America, that of Alec Murdaugh. The disgraced former lawyer was sentenced to life in prison 3 years ago for killing his wife and son, and spawned half a dozen TV documentaries, including the Netflix series The Murdaugh Murders. Well, today he's been granted a fresh trial in South Carolina. Let's go live to our US correspondent, Mark Stone. Mark, just give us a bit of a background on this trial, because it is quite a journey from murder conviction to a retrial.
Yeah, it's a breathtaking moment. It is a remarkable development in a trial which gripped the nation and beyond, in fact. I mean, you mentioned some of the spin-offs that came as a result of a 6-week televised trial. Alec Murdaugh is a prominent attorney from South Carolina. He was very, very well known, not just in South Carolina, but actually beyond as well, and accused in 2021 of murdering his wife Maggie and his 22-year-old son Paul. There was the trial, as I say, in March 2023, dramatic, televised, and he was found guilty of those murders and separately of a number of financial issues of financial wrongdoing too, and sentenced to life in prison. And then the dramatic news today that the Supreme Court in the state of South Carolina has overturned the conviction, paving the way for a new trial. Why? Well, because the clerk of the court, a woman called Becky Hill, it is alleged tried to influence the jury. At one stage, she told the jury, "To me, watch his actions, watch him closely." And the jurors took that to mean that she believed that he was guilty. She also said on Judgment Day, this shouldn't take long. At one stage, she gave one of the jurors a ride home. Generally, all of this taken together meant, according to the lawyers of Alec Murdaugh, who pushed for this retrial, they argued that his constitutional right to a fair trial was denied, and in a unanimous decision, the Supreme Court, the highest court in the state of South Carolina, today agreed, and so the conviction was quashed. A retrial will come.
So, Mark, I understand he's still in prison. What happens now?
Well, I mean, what's interesting is, I mean, he will remain in prison because of the financial wrongdoing. So he hasn't been released. What is interesting is, you know, how the new trial will pan out. It'll be a different jury. It'll be a different judge. He gave evidence in his last trial. Now, it may well be the case that his prosecuting team decides this time that didn't go so well last time, so they won't put him on to give evidence himself. So they're going to be able to learn from what went wrong last time in order to try and change things in this new trial. So absolutely fascinating. And I guess there will be a few new episodes of the Netflix series.
Yeah, indeed. Mark, thank you so much, as always, for bringing us up to date. Now to a dramatic story out of the Philippines, where more than a dozen gunshots were heard inside the country's Senate building. Just have a listen. Terrifying images there. The shots were heard as police and Marines moved in to arrest a senator wanted by the International Criminal Court for alleged crimes against humanity. It was not immediately clear who fired the shots. Philippine Senator Ronald De La Rosa had earlier said he was anticipating his arrest and urged people to come to the legislature to prevent him from being detained. So the question is, who is Ronald Dela Rosa? Well, Dela Rosa oversaw the massive crackdown on drugs in the Philippines while he was serving as police chief under the then President Rodrigo Duterte. He's accused of crimes against humanity, which he denies. Duterte was himself arrested and taken to The Hague in March last year over the murders committed during the campaign. Sky's Cordelia Lynch reported from inside the Philippines during the bloody crackdown. Just have a look.
In the shadows, we meet a hitman. They may be quieter these days, but he claims corrupt police still want guns for hire.
Who's asking you to kill?
The police give me an envelope with the money and the photo of the subject. I'll get between 20 and 30,000 pesos per head. The police will give me the orders, and after I kill the target, I throw the gun away. I shoot them 3 times in the head, because if the target survives, they could identify me.
Sarah Sleece lost 2 sons, Alman and Dickley, 6 months apart. She claims her sons were killed unlawfully. Police say they were drug suspects and that Dickley fired first.
You buried 2 sons just 6 months apart. What impact has that had on your life?
Grabe. It's difficult for me. Duterte has no pity. He's not helping the people.
That was Cordelia Lynch. Well, thanks very much for joining us tonight. The Wrap with Anna is up next. Goodbye.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?